So let's continue. Let's talk about sources of threat intelligence today. And the first one here is indicators of compromise. These are the IUCs usually associated with malicious activity in the environment. It could be a malware infection, it could be a targeted attack, it could be a phishing campaign, it could be maybe a web server compromise, it could be anything. So when we hear the term IUCs, some samples of that, hashes of files, they could be malware files, they could be admin tools, custom built tools, anything. IP addresses and domain names or URLs associated with the attacker's infrastructure that are used to host the malware. It could be the command control server. Those usually can be used to update the network defenses like firewalls, intrusion detection, NDRs, the SIM. So they will be updated in order to detect and block these communications. Now, here are two samples of IUCs of different threats. The IUC can include hash, it can include a file name, a file path on the system, PE header details that help us to detect certain maybe compilation time, if this is a specific threat, registry keys, mutex, DLLs, anything. So a lot of things that can be included in an IUC. And those samples can be used to detect the threat on the endpoint. IUCs, the network level, it could be an IP address, URL, domain name, it could be an email address for the email gateways, etc. So by having the indicators of compromise, that's how the defenses like endpoint security, the SIM, firewall, IPS, sandbox, email gateways, web gateways, will be more aware of the threats, and that's how they can stop those attacks. So they might receive it from the vendor as a reputation feed, or you can upload it manually, or you can subscribe to open source or a premium feed to receive those indicators of compromise. Another source is like client-driven data from inside the environment, where you receive the logs into the SIM by receiving the Windows event logs, DNS logs, NetFlow, PCAP data, email logs, the antivirus, etc., etc. So all the data that you receive, the telemetry that you push to the SIM is important. That's where you can correlate them, you can analyze them if you have a breach, or if you have a specific event in the environment, or maybe you received a research paper or a blog about a certain campaign. So you want to make sure you have proper visibility in the environment, and you can go back historically and search whether you have any kind of detection. Do we have any signs of communication with those command control servers or domain names? Or have anyone downloaded the files or interacted with these IP addresses? So you can go back historically. So that's why it's very important to collect these logs, store them for a long period. So this way you can do threat hunting, you can investigate any previous attacks. In case there are multiple incidents that are related together, you can go back to the logs and start investigating them. So it's very important to collect the data. And this is where Sun Tzu mentioned to know yourself. If you don't have Windows Event Viewer logs, if you don't have PowerShell logging, if you don't have DNS, DHCP, NetFlow, you will be blind. If you have a breach, or if you have any sign of suspicious activity, and the right logging sources, if they are not configured and not sending the data to SIM, then you will be misled. So if you are searching for certain thing and you found nothing, you may assume that you are good to go and everything is fine. But in reality, you might be already breached and you don't know because you are not collecting the right data. So that's why having the internal logs, the internal telemetry sent to SIM, to a centralized collection, is very important as a source of intelligence. Collecting, for example, um, uh, let's say access logs to the physical security logs. And in case you have an insider threat and you want to do some correlation with HR, with the admins to discover, to investigate whether there is someone who's leaking data or abusing his access. So if you don't have the physical system access logs together with the Windows logs, with logs from the system and correlate that, you'll not be able to have proper insider threat investigation. So there are multiple cases or use cases where you can use the intelligence to investigate certain incidents. Deep web, this is another source that it's usually by accessing member-only hacking forums where the criminals, they share their latest tools, their latest discovered vulnerabilities, their latest exploits and malwares. And by monitoring those forums, usually if customers, they don't have the expertise to monitor these forums, they outsource this to intelligence vendors or to their cyber security vendors, where they have expertise in the team and their intelligence team. So they look into those forums and based on monitoring the latest chats and latest posts, they will be able to notify their customers about the latest exploits and malware so they can enable patch prioritization. So these things are very important to monitor. The dark web, another place where hackers they meet. So to access the dark web, you need to use the Tor client, for example, to access the dark web, and you will have hundreds of marketplaces or forums that are used by cyber criminals to purchase goods and services. So anything illegal, you can find it there, from weapons to fake credit cards to stolen financial data, ransomware data, so everything. So also the cybersecurity or cyber intelligence vendors, they have the capabilities to access those dark web and monitor them. So this helps them to protect their customers by looking at the stolen credentials, stolen data, the latest tools and weapons, cyber weapons sold by the criminals. So this way we will be up to date as defenders and cybersecurity industry. Here are some examples from deep web and dark web, like the example on the right. This is a translated post from a Russian forum. A hacker is looking for an exploit that targets CVE 2017-15429. So if there is like a new vulnerability and now we start to see chat in those forums, it means this vulnerability might be weaponized and they are creating and selling these exploit tools. So for you as a defender, by knowing that the threat actors are chatting and talking about this new vulnerability, it means this vulnerability needs to be patched immediately, because at any time, a proof of concept code could be released or sold or even stolen or released for free, and they start attacking organizations around the world. Another example here from the dark web of selling access to a compromised server, where the threat actor provides all the details about these systems, and they provide access. So usually you use Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency to purchase the access. So they sell everything, even ransomware data. They exfiltrate data and they start selling it in the dark web. So they add more pressure on the organizations to pay the ransom. They may sell stolen or exfiltrated databases, credit cards, user information, etc., etc. And that's how they sell their services or goods. And the threat intelligence analyst, they can, and I will talk more about it in a second, which is part of the human intelligence. So usually intelligence organization companies, they have analysts in their teams that are embedded in these forums, and I will cover this in a second. Another source is messaging platforms. That's where the cyber criminals, they chat, they hang around, and they meet. So they talk about potential targets. They may talk about some operation or campaign, or brag about compromising certain organizations. Hacktivists also, they use it whenever they plan to breach or to deface or to launch denial of service on certain targets. So monitoring those messaging platforms is very important to collect intelligence on potential targets and potential planned activities. Social media can be used by threat actors to talk about or to brag about zero-day vulnerabilities, to talk about some malware or some infection or ransomware attacks. So they usually use the social media forums like Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms. So they share these information. Monitoring social media is one great source of intelligence collection. There are open source tools, there are commercial tools and platforms that help customers or defenders to search for certain keywords, to search for certain CVEs, certain indicators of compromise. And whenever there is a mention on the social media or on the dark web or the deep web, you will receive notifications immediately with additional data to help you look at these intelligence data. An example is Twent. It's an open source that can scrape data available on Twitter by leveraging the Twitter API, and it can help you to look for certain interesting keywords. Here are examples of intelligence data that can be collected off Twitter when someone is talking about certain CVE related to Jenkins software, and here's a proof of concept hosted on GitHub. So if you have Jenkins, or if you have Apache or Windows or any system, and there is someone who just tweeted about a specific CVE, and he developed a proof of concept code and hosted in his GitHub, he's bragging about it, whether he's a red teamer or he's a threat actor. So now you, as a blue teamer or a defender, you need to know about this proof of concept, maybe test it in your lab, see if your defenses are able to stop it, like intrusion detection or your firewall, or maybe you want to test a patch to confirm that the patch really works, so you can execute the code, and if it fails, then you are good to go. You can close the ticket. Other sources, it could be malwares that's discovered by honeypots. And there are a lot of researchers, they publish the honeypot logs online to show you the latest discovered malwares that are captured by the honeypots, or the latest phishing IBs or spamming emails or ransomware campaigns, etc., etc. So Twitter is a great source of intelligence collection by monitoring it using open source tools, or by using third-party websites that can allow you to search for certain keywords or a watch list. And based on that, you will be notified immediately about the availability of new hits or matching tweets. And from there, you will be able to go and do your analysis. There is a discipline, it's a branch of the cyber intelligence called social media intelligence, or SOCMINT. So social media intelligence is the type of intelligence that you do to collect from social media websites. And these websites could be open, they could be requiring authentication. So usually it's used for different types of intelligence needs. During the pandemic, for example, organizations in the healthcare or governments, they can do social media intelligence to see who is tweeting about symptoms, COVID-19 symptoms, or where are, let's say, posts or chats or these conversations around a certain disease or about a certain geopolitical event or or a plan to protest, etc., etc. So social media intelligence is a discipline where it's also linked with open source intelligence because the data is available online, it's in public. But the difference with OSINT is not limited to cyber. It could be covering newspapers, radio, television, the internet, any media where you can find information. And there are many tools, there are many softwares, open source or commercial, that help analysts to apply open source analysis to search for different type of information. So back to the social media, it can be another or an additional source of information that if it's validated and it's well vetted, so you need to do some vetting because sometimes those information might not be accurate or it may not having the proper context. So you can just take it and apply it inside your organization. But when you cross-check it with other intelligence sources and you confirm that it's valid, you can use it to defend your organization. So you can apply blacklists, like adding the hashes, domains, URLs, IPs to your defenses so they can block these threats. It can help you to gain more context. So if you're searching about certain attack or certain vulnerability by searching online and you found some researchers or red teamers chatting about a new vulnerability, how you can weaponize it, how it can be executed, what is the proper way to defend it. So this will help you to collect more details and at the end of the day, defend your environment. Here are two examples of vulnerabilities that are discovered, and it could be by researchers, it could be by like Project Zero, which is part of Google, and others researchers and sources where they speak about specific attacks. For you as a defender, keeping an eye on a Twitter is very important because it's a very quick way to share information on the internet. So for me, if I am a red teamer and I've just discovered something interesting, the first thing I will do, I will go tweet about it. Then I may go and write a long blog about it or a long paper. So you don't want to wait for the long version of the information because we deal with thousands of updates on hourly basis. Personally, if I leave my Twitter unchecked for a day, I will have thousands of new tweets that require me to go through them to see if there's something interesting in the industry. Imagine you as a defender, you are protecting hundreds of assets in the environment. So you need to look for all the attacks that are being announced or discovered in the industry on daily basis. You can't just check it once a week or once a month. You will be outdated and you may be surprised by a new attack that was announced a couple of days ago, and suddenly you start to see some scans on your perimeter firewalls looking for this new CVE, if it's exposed or not. So you need to be proactive and to be ahead of the attackers. Human intelligence, this is an important thing. It has a lot of applications. Now, I will not talk about the government side and the law enforcement side of how they use human intelligence, but where it's relevant to cyber, it's relevant where cyber security or intelligence vendors, they will have security or researchers who are embedded inside the dark web and deep web forums, markets, and chat rooms, where they have their own darknet personas or their own digital persona appearing as a hacker or a threat actor. So they can mingle, they gain the trust, and they will have a legitimate profile in the forum. So this way they will be able to have immediate access to the latest attacks that are being discussed, or the latest shared tools or malware samples, or maybe if someone is offering to sell fresh stolen credit cards, or fresh data exfiltrated as part of a targeted ransomware attack. Those embedded or undercover analysts, they will immediately learn about those activities and start engaging with their customers, with their clients, so they will be able to give them additional intelligence about what is happening, who may have already breached their environment and selling their data in the dark web. So having the human intelligence part of the services offered by those vendors is very important. You can't replace the human analyst by just using algorithms or automated tools. This is a good thing, but having a human analyst who already embed themselves into these forums will give you additional capabilities that may not be covered by the technical systems. Let me pause here for a second and see if we have questions. I think we have something here. So there is a question, is there any automation tools or robotics that search for the new threats among the sources? Yeah, so definitely there are multiple ways of automating the intelligence collection. As I mentioned, it could be open source tools. So the Twint for Twitter is just one sample. There are many codes available on GitHub, or maybe commercial tools sold by vendors that can help you to search for certain interesting intelligence feeds and cross-check it with the local sources that you have. So this will help you to minimize the time of collection and analysis. Some of these tools could be tip platforms, or part of the SIM, or dedicated intelligence collection tools. So there are multiple ways of doing it. There is no single tool that will cover everything. You may have, as an intelligence team, multiple tools that are used as part of your daily work. So we talked about the human intelligence. Let's talk about malware analysis. This is another source where the internal SOC team, the intelligence analysts, incident responders, they can analyze new files or malwares discovered as part of a targeted attack, or a drive-by download, etc. So you can extract additional indicators of compromise, which is one form of threat data. And this will help you to understand the objective of the malware, what are the IUCs, and how you can link it with the attacker's tactics, techniques, and procedures. And this way, you will have better informed decisions as a defender on containing the threat, remediating the compromised systems, and eradicating the attacker from the environment. So there are multiple tools and technologies, whether open source or commercial, that helps you to do malware analysis. And malware analysis could be reverse engineering, where you have someone with reverse engineering skills and using tools like IDA Pro and other reverse engineering tools, or it could be using a sandbox. So here are three examples just to show you. Now, on the left side, this is like a sample of Cisco Threat Grid malware sandbox. It could be Cuckoo, open source. It could be AnyRun. It could be any sandbox that is available in your environment. Or if you don't have a sandbox at all, you may need to have these tools inside your environment. You can use Cuckoo as a free sandbox, but if you want to have an enterprise grade and commercial technology, there are many vendors who provide this. IDA Pro is a tool used by malware analysts to digest the malware and to look into the malware, how it works. So this will show you at the machine level, the assembly, to see the instructions and how the malware work. VirusTotal is another source for malware intelligence, where you can upload files for analysis or search for hashes, or if you have the virus intelligence private API access. Not sure if they call it this way now, but they do have a commercial access, so you can go and use Yara rules for hunting. You can search across all the VirusTotal database for certain IUCs. So if you are investigating a campaign, investigating a certain threat, they will provide you with more details like relations with other samples, the behavior, and additional intelligence that can be consumed even by machines like TIB platform, forensics tools, or etc. etc. So they have an API, same thing as a threat grid. It has an API. You can connect it with your defense tools to export the intelligence data. So malware analysis is a very important source of intelligence. Geopolitical developments. This is another thing which can help at the strategic level. So by monitoring the news, by monitoring the geopolitical updates in the region, you will be able to know if there are nation state actors who may target your organization. And that's a very important thing by monitoring the latest news, and you can link the activities with what is happening. So if you're receiving certain phishing campaigns and opening the PDF, the weaponized PDF or Word document, sometimes you may find some geopolitical text or pictures or anything related to news or to some events or activities. So you may be able to connect the dots and understand that this might be part of a targeted attack and who may be behind this attack. So monitoring geopolitical developments is a very important aspect. Part of my master's program, we studied a lot about geopolitics, about the historical disputes, the regional disputes around the world. So I would be able to connect the dots, not from the technical side, the technical tactics, techniques, and procedures, but also the geopolitical. Why country A will attack country B? Why threat actor X might be interested in targeting government C? So these type of things are very important to understand it from all angles. Code repositories. So monitoring exploit databases, monitoring GitHub, monitoring similar repositories where red teamers, security researchers, or even threat actors and hackers, they post and share and publish the latest exploits and hacking tools. They even share the source code. So monitoring those repositories is very important because when you see that there are new exploit kits or exploit code published which target certain vulnerabilities, then it's the time to prioritize patching those vulnerabilities, because now not only this is a CVE with a rating 9 or 10 or 8, and it can be exploited remotely, but also it has working and available exploit codes on the net. So by monitoring the repositories and by searching for certain keywords or CVEs, or what are the latest vulnerabilities that might target assets in our environment. So this way, as an intelligence analyst, you may send a new alert inside your organization and inform your application team or database team or servers team that, okay, guys, there is a new exploit that target Oracle or target Java, which is already used in our systems, or it might target WordPress or some code that is used by hundreds of applications inside our organization. This way, they will be taking a prioritized approach to fix and patch those vulnerabilities. By receiving the notification at the right time, you will be well prepared if a new attack targeting those systems is using the same vulnerability. One thing that I always inform my customers, if you don't use GitHub as an example, and you don't publish code there, block it altogether, because there are many red teaming tools that are stored inside GitHub and used during targeted attacks and active breaches. So even I've seen many weaponized documents which can call GitHub and download a specific tools and run it locally on the system. So if you block GitHub, or at least limit the access to GitHub to developers only or to certain users, this way you minimize the chances that someone can use it against you, similar to other repositories. So I just gave an example to GitHub, and I'm not against it, but I'm telling you from the threat landscape how the threat actors they abuse code repositories. Paste sites, another thing like Pastebin, it's where you can, as a threat actor, paste exploit codes, paste specific code that can be used by their malware or used by their maybe weaponized documents. And as I said, code snippets or even evidence of breach. So they can use it to store or to host their weapons and call it from their malware or from their phishing documents. And if it's allowed, the code will be downloaded and your proxy will allow it because maybe it's let's say categorized as a trusted website. So this way they evade your defenses. If you don't deal with paste sites, it's recommended to block them. There are many examples of previous attacks where paste sites were used as a delivery mechanism. The other side of the coin is we're monitored for evidence of breaches. Many times attackers, they post new pastes on these websites to show an evidence of a breach, like leaked credentials, leaked databases, leaked customer information. So by monitoring the paste sites, you will see whether this is relevant to you, to your organization or not. And you can have an account, create an account, put a watch list for certain keywords, and whenever there is a match, it will notify you. So this way you can monitor if there is a hacktivist attack who are announcing a new DDoS attack, or maybe stealing information from your environment, and they mention the environment, the organization name, so you can immediately be notified upon creating a new text or data on these websites. Information sharing platforms. This is where we can receive intelligence from the sharing platforms that can be financial organizations such as Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center, FS ISAC. This is available in different countries where multiple banks or financial organizations, they can receive intelligence. And this is like a closed community where they share the IUCs, the latest attacks, so they can be informed and up to date. You can receive from open source like Alien Vault, OTX, for example. You can receive from CERT. You can receive from your maybe local group if you are part of a specific industry like finance, government, oil and gas, etc. So they will have an intelligence sharing platform that once you subscribe, you can receive intelligence feeds and latest information about threat actors' activity that was discovered in one of the organizations which participates in this sharing group. So to summarize the sources of intelligence, there are multiple ways, as I mentioned before. If you don't have an intelligence program, you can start today by monitoring some of these sources. Start by enhancing your internal visibility, by improving the amount of logs that you send to your SIEM. Start monitoring the social media, look at your vendors, intelligence research team, For example, in Cisco, we have Talos. So they have the talosintelligence.com website. Other vendors, they have their own teams. You can look at their website for the latest campaigns and attacks that they discover. Monitor the news, look at the social media. Maybe you can have an intelligence sharing program that you can subscribe to. So there are multiple ways of collecting the intelligence. Also, not forgetting the malware analysis. The attack surface for any organization is basically all the systems that you have, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, or if you have a hybrid environment. So definitely you need to also consider attacks and threat actors who may target your public cloud environment. This is a good question. Thank you. Many organizations, they started to move to the cloud pre-COVID, and even during COVID, we started to see a lot of migrations to cloud, whether it's SaaS, IaaS, or PaaS. And those cloud infrastructures, they are complex to manage. That's why the defenders, they need to update their knowledge on what are the type of attacks that they may face in the cloud, who are the threat actors that are targeting environments such as Azure, Google, or AWS, and what type of attacks, techniques, tactics, procedures, tools that are relevant to such public cloud environments. So also when we look at the sources of intelligence, we need to monitor. So for example, when I said about the client-derived data, it's not only the on-prem data, you need to collect the logs from your public cloud. So that will be included within your analysis. So if you are searching for some suspicious source IP, you will be able to see it, whether it's targeting your on-prem systems or it is scanning your AWS workloads or scanning your VPCs, virtual private clouds. So you don't want to have gaps in visibility. You need to have complete visibility for your on-prem systems, for your branches, remote users. If they are working from home, you need to collect telemetry from their laptops, such as DNS logs, Windows logs, antivirus or EDR logs, NetFlow, etc., etc. Send it to your centralized collection. So whenever you are searching for a new IUCs, or if you're doing threat hunting, if you have a breach, you will be able to have complete visibility for your endpoints, web-facing applications, servers, from your network infrastructure to collect NetFlow, syslog from your network devices, to collect VPC flow logs, to collect IAM logs, identity, any type of logs that your environment generates, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, must be collected because this is part of your internal sources. So most of the time we're talking about external sources, but internal sources is very important because having gaps in visibility is not healthy, because at the end of the day, you are monitoring the entire environment and you don't need to have gaps in your analysis. So let's see if we have, okay. Is it practical to integrate SIM with more than one threat intelligence tool like Talos and Alien Vault? All right. So, and how SIM contributes to threat intelligence. So SIM can be part of the internal intelligence sources, because that's where you, as I mentioned before, that's where you collect and store your internal telemetry data. So as an intelligence analyst or SOC analyst, maybe you are wearing two hats, but there are many organizations, they have dedicated intelligence teams where they have the right skill set to carry on the intelligence tasks on daily to day-to-day basis. One of the sources that you can use is your SIM, because if you have a new breach report or a blog or a tweet or something from the dark web or anywhere, and you want to see if you have any match in your SIM, any hits by your defenses. So that's where you go and search. Now, the other questions about subscribing to threat intelligence feeds, definitely the SIM, sometimes they subscribe to one feed, sometimes they allow it to you so you can go and subscribe. So make sure you choose the feeds and try to minimize on the open source because they lack the context and metadata. They might be introducing false positives. So if there is an intelligence feed or a threat feed that include Microsoft.com or Google.com as part of their block list, this is not a clean feed. So this way, it might introduce issues to you. That's why avoiding the free ones that they are not vetted, they are not monitored by the researchers, or even you should also review the detections from time to time to see if you have false positives. There is multiple ways how you can consume intelligence. It could be directly into your SIM. It could be directly into your defense tools like your firewall, your email gateway, or EDR, or it could be sent to a dedicated and centralized threat intelligence platform. And I will cover this shortly, which is a much better and efficient and more productive way of receiving intelligence from different sources, analyze it, deduplicate it, enrich it, add context, remove false positives, and export it into different formats that can be sent to your defense tools. Like you can send it to your SIM, send it to your EDR, to your firewall, email gateway, web gateway, etc., etc. So this is like the ideal way of consuming threat feeds from outside the organization. And I will talk about this shortly. This is a good question. Okay. Other questions? No. Okay. Um, Now, is it practical to integrate SIM? Yeah, I've mentioned that. Now, Talos, for example, it is integrated directly into the Cisco security products like the Firepower, the email, the web gateway, the AMP, etc. So it's already directly integrated there. Um, um, we also have other sources like the Umbrella Investigate API, the Threat Grid, where they can also integrate.